Welcome to an early in the week Wednesday edition of This Week in Racing. I'm David Land. The reason I'm doing this early is because I'm going to be flying out to Atlanta, Georgia for the Petit Le Mans tomorrow, and that is very exciting because it's one of my favorite events in the United States. It's a fantastic race. I haven't been since 2013. My first one was in 2011, so I'm very excited to get back. I think it's the best road course in the country. Very beautiful. But regardless of being this early in the week, we've got a ton of stuff to talk about. Lots of NASCAR news, including Jimmie Johnson potentially getting a new sponsor, Leavine Family Racing and all of the drama surrounding that team, 2019 package also to talk about at NASCAR, and we're also going to cover a little bit of Petit Le Mans. But really the main topic we're going to be covering in this video is talking about the W League, the all-women's racing series that's supposedly going to start in 2019. We're going to break down some of the details about it and talk about the massive amount of controversy that has surrounded this. The internet seems split right down the middle, so we're going to try to decompress a lot of it and see exactly where this racing league stands and exactly what it is trying to accomplish. But first, a little bit of housekeeping from last week. Philip Morris actually personally responded in the comments to my video on Project Winnow and their sponsorship of Scuderia Ferrari in last week's video. And yes, I now know it's pronounced Project Winnow. You can stop reminding me in the comments. But if you want to read their side of the story, go over to that video and check out the pinned comment. I pinned it. You can read it, decide for yourself where the truth lies, and maybe even respond to them. I don't know if they'll actually respond. It was definitely a very lawyer-y written piece. It was a lot of PR, but I guess it was great to actually get a response from I guess they're a Fortune 500 company, so a little YouTuber with a tiny little video about them got them to respond, so I'm doing something right. NASCAR news. Kasey Kahne announced formally his retirement from NASCAR. Effective immediately, he will no longer drive in NASCAR races. Health problems due to dehydration have sidelined him for the rest of his career, though I suspect he's going to be in open wheel cars next year, so I guess the open air will help him out a little bit on that one. Regan Smith will take on the lion's share of the driving for next season, but it wasn't over for Leavine Family Racing. They announced that Matt DiBenedetto will be driving their number 95 for next year, and they also confirmed that they will be a part of the Toyota Alliance going into next year. They will get support. It's unconfirmed exactly what level of support, but they are getting support from Joe Gibbs Racing, essentially taking over somewhat the program that Furniture Row had last year. This could be a huge opportunity for Matt DiBenedetto. For all of you who think he's really good, he's the real deal. This is going to be a great shot for him. As for Daniel Suarez, that seemed to be the place that everybody thought he would go because of the Toyota connection. It seems like he's actually headed around to Stewart Haas Racing of all places, so look for Daniel Suarez to slot in there. And we also had a picture leak earlier this week of the 2019 NASCAR aerodynamic packaging testing at the Phoenix International Raceway. And I'll just let the pictures speak for themselves on this one. And also, since I'm going to Petit Le Mans, the final IMSA race of the year, and one of them that I'm very excited about, let's talk about it. The point standings in all three classes are up for grabs. Particularly interesting is the prototype division. Currently, the number 31 Action Express Whelen Engineering Cadillac leads the way, but in second place, only 4 points behind, is the Oreca from Core Autosport. Now, what's interesting about that is for next year, these two cars will be split amongst different classes. The DPIs will be provided the necessary adjustments to become the fast top class, and the P2 cars will hold station. A bit unfortunate, and I can tell you what, very biased here. I'm very much rooting for the number 54 car to pull it off. I want to see IMSA take that brand split and shove it. Regardless, GTLM, there's a great manufacturer battle there. Any of the manufacturers participating outside of BMW and Ferrari have a chance at the championship. But the most important news to me is the fact that Porsche is throwing it back this weekend with two absolutely lovely cars, throwing it back to their 1998 GT1 cars. Now, what's interesting and a bit of a historical oopsie on the Porsche's part here is that while, yes, this livery raced at the inaugural running of the Petit Le Mans in 1998, It's a bit infamous because it's infamous for the Yannick Dalmas blowover on the back straightaway when the Porsche GT1 did a backflip. So I don't know if that's a sign of things to come or a bad omen for the Porsche GT team. We'll have to wait and see. But perhaps the most relevant and interesting to the discussion we're going to have today is the battle in the GTD points. We've got the 48 Lamborghini, which currently leads the championship, but only 6 points behind as a solo effort in the championship is Catherine Legg. There's a potential in her Michael Shank Racing Acura that she could take the championship. Now, it's not unique to IMSA Racing to have female drivers taking championships. Only a couple years ago, Christina Nielsen went back-to-back in that series. But again, it's relevant and a good segue into our next topic. So yes, formally announced today is the W Series, which looks to begin racing in the springtime of 2019. As the W in the name would suggest, it's an all-women series. Only women are allowed to enter this series, though what's interesting about it is that it says it's free for women to enter, granted they meet the qualifications of being a professional racing driver. They're aiming for 18 to 20 entries of what they describe as the best female talent in the world. They will be utilizing Tatis F3 cars to be racing with, as if there's not enough F3 categories already racing in the world. It's fairly vague on the track description. There isn't a set schedule. There's vague allusions to America, Asia, and Europe, and the actual quotation is the best and most famous tracks in the world. There's $1.5 million of prize money on the line for this series that will be distributed to the top 18 drivers in the point standings. $500,000 of that will go to the winner, presumably to help further their career, similar to what the Mazda Road to Indy does for the winners of their championships. Now, what's interesting is that the motorsport community has almost been split right down the center in terms of support and against this particular series. But the voices that truly matter in this particular interest, or in this particular instance, are the women associated in this sport. And once again, we see an almost even split between women involved in racing thinking about this. You've got personalities and drivers like Pippa Mann, Leilani Munter, and famous Le Mans winning engineer Lena Gade, very much against this concept. But then you go on to the other side of the coin, Natalie Pinkham, a reporter for the BBC, Jamie Chadwick, an up-and-coming young driver, and Tatiana Calderon, who is a test driver for the Sauber team, very much in favor of the W Series. So what we've got here is a very divided reaction to this. And what we're going to try to do here is we're going to try to break down the positives and the negatives of such a series here, an all-women series, only women's series. And I think the first negative I look at, and I definitely, on the scale here, if we're looking at for and against, I think I lean more towards the against category. And the reason I do that is not because of any sexist thing or anything, quite the opposite, in fact. I look at this and I see segregation. Let's just go out and say what it is. We're segregating men and women and saying that, or at least giving the perception that women can't perform or are unable to perform at the level that a man can in a race car. Now that's news to me, because I always thought one of the great things about racing, one of the great things that sets the sport of automobile racing apart from, say, a soccer or a football or a basketball, is that men and women can compete on equal terms. The race car doesn't know who's turning the steering wheel. And ultimately, if you get a driver, whomever they are, with the talent, comfortable, they're going to go fast. It's a wonderful part of this sport. So when you look at a series, and it could be as well-intentioned as all get out, but you look at a series like this and you say, what's the implication here? What are the people running this trying to imply? or unintentionally implying. Now, something that at least on first glance appears to be a positive is the fact that this is almost motorsport socialism. You've got a free-to-enter series for any woman who's qualified. On the surface, that looks fantastic. You're thinking, wow, okay, that works. That's cool. That's a great solution to the problem that there's not enough female drivers to really be competitive or be able to rise through the ranks. That's ultimately seems to be their mission statement here, the W Series mission statement. But when you look further down onto the surface, or below the surface level is all sunshine and rainbows. You look just a little bit below it, and you start to see the cracks. The cracks are the same cracks that are affecting every other motorsport in the world. And it has the color of green. Money. Where is the money coming from for this series? No major sponsorships announced. No major brand partnerships announced. No benefactors announced. And at the same time, we've got a commitment to buy 18 to 20 at least. Probably you're going to be buying about 40 of them for a primary and a backup car for each driver, theoretically. 40 Tatis F3 cars. Let's just say that. And let's think conservatively. I don't know exactly what a Tatis F3 car costs. I would say $150,000 to $100,000. Let's go on the low end. Let's say it costs $100,000 for an F3 car, just the chassis and maybe the engine. $100,000 times 40. All right? That's an awfully large investment. Then you look at the prize money, $1.5 million. That's a big sum. Now, if you look at that sum versus what a racing budget actually costs, you look at $500,000 in racing terms. What does that exactly get you? Now, I'm not necessarily up to date on the pricing structure of the European ladder system, but I'm pretty up to date on what it takes to do it in America. It's about $500,000 to go to Pro Mazda. It's about $1 million to go to Indy Lights and $3 million to go to IndyCar. So you look at $500,000, that's a drop in the bucket, and that doesn't get you very high up the ladder. One of the stated goals of this series. Here's another problem. The drivers are driving for free. That stinks to me, and not in a bad way. On the surface, again, free drivers or free drives for drivers with talent, fantastic. A positive of this, I suppose you could look at, is free track time. But nothing is free in racing. And this smells a lot like the Red Bull driver search. If you don't know what the Red Bull driver search is, it actually produced drivers like Sebastian Vettel, Max Verstappen, Scott Speed, though Scott Speed wasn't really the greatest driver in the entire world. But what happened was a lot of young drivers hitched their hopes to Red Bull, and when they were no use to Red Bull, they were cast out into the shadows. There's no coincidence here that there's a couple of drivers very closely associated with Red Bull that are associated in this series. You look at David Coulthard and Adrian Newey, who's the designer of the Red Bull cars. They know, as well as a lot of us know, and it's kind of unsaid, but I'm going to say it, a woman driver, a female driver, who can win, compete for championships, run up front consistently, is money. Big money. Some of the biggest, probably the biggest pot of gold that's sitting out there and unclaimed in the world of racing at this particular moment. So from what I see here, I think what this series is really trying to do, well-intentioned or not, this isn't necessarily a judgment. This is what I think they're trying to do, ultimately, is that they are trying to identify and find the female version of Lewis Hamilton, the female version of Ayrton Senna, the female version of Scott Dixon. They're trying to find that driver that they can develop into a multi-billion-dollar superstar. That's where we're seeing this money. This is why we're seeing this money, I suspect, being thrown into this. Because there's no doubt about it. It is very difficult for female drivers to get to the top rungs of the sport. But why is that? Why is that? I think that is another interesting question and conundrum to come out of this, because it is opening up this conversation. I think a lot of it has to do with plain old-fashioned demographics. And this may be a bit of a hot button issue, so I'm sorry if this gets too woke to say. But auto racing has been, is, and may always be a male-dominated sport. Now, don't misinterpret this as me wanting it to be this way. This is me looking at it as a realistic view of it, looking at a realistic view of this. I look at my YouTube demographics. I run a racing channel. I'm talking racing right now. I talk racing virtually every video that I do. I look at my YouTube demographics for this last month. Do you want to know the percentage of female viewers that were watching my videos? 5%. 5. 95% of the people interested in my content, watch my content, are males. And what's even more interesting about the data that I was looking at, the data that YouTube Analytics, and I'm sure it's not 100% accurate, but it's the data I have. This is the data I can go off of and the data I can look at. The data I have shows that young women, especially, do not watch my content, do not watch racing content. The highest percentages of women that watch my videos are the ones in the 34 to 54 bracket. There's a, kind of middle-aged women, for whatever reason, watch racing content, at least on my channel. Now, other people's racing content may have different demographics. Again, I only have access to my personal demographics. I only know what that says to me. Now, that being said, I do know a few young female drivers who watch my content. In fact, a lot of young women who are involved in racing have come up to me and said, "Hey, I watch your videos." And I say, "Well, thank you." And it surprises me because I look at those demographics and I see what a small percentage of that is. Now, why am I talking about percentages? Why am I talking about what a small chunk of the pie that is? Well, it's because think about what percentage of racing drivers there are in the world, male racing drivers. Think about the percentage of drivers who are elite level talent. The drivers who can take on Lewis Hamilton. The drivers who can win F1 championships. The drivers who can win IndyCar championships. The drivers who can win NASCAR championships. The drivers who can win races. Think how small of a percentage that is of the overall pie. That 95%, if you will. Think how small that is. Think how many truly elite level talents there are out there in racing versus the total pool of drivers. Now, think about that small slice of women who are interested or driving race cars. And think what a small percentage that a Lewis Hamilton is going to come out of that little slice, when out of the major slice, you've got like a 1 in a billion chance of it. So I think in a lot of respects, this is the fact that there just aren't enough young women who are participating in racing, who are interested in racing, to be able to identify a talent. I think they're right. I do think that W Racing, or a W Series, is right. They've identified the right problem, which is that young women are not getting, or at least not being able to, for whatever reason, find the opportunities to go forward. But I think they're going about this the wrong way in segregating women into a different series. Because the only thing you're going to do here is develop women drivers against other women drivers. And looking at the amount of money that they're spending here, which is millions and millions and millions of dollars, and the fact that they're running cars that are not unique to the ladder system in racing, why on earth are they not essentially doing what they're doing now, doing this free shootout, testing all these women drivers, and then picking 2 or 3 of them and going and doing the F3 championship in Europe, or going and doing the F3 championship in America. I went to the New Jersey Motorsports Park, and they had an F3 race. There were 4 entries. So they're not hurting for car count, or they're hurting for car count. So if you want to go invade a series, there you go. There's some F3 racing that's going on right now if you want to go race F3 cars. And ultimately, if a female driver is truly talented and you put the resources behind her, she's going to go to the front. I mean, there are 3 things that a racing driver, I think, needs to succeed. They need determination, they need talent, and they need the funding. And so I think most people who have ever stepped in a race car have 2 of those things. But the elite level people usually have all 3. But finding someone with all 3 of those things is very difficult. So programs like these, or at least ideas like these, are good, but this one I don't think is going to be executed very well. And I fear not only that this separation is going to cause a massive rift in the motorsport community, it's going to ultimately hurt these female drivers who enter this series in the long run, because ultimately they're not going to be going up against, they're going to be going up against the best drivers in their gender, but not the best drivers in the world. So therein lies a development problem. And then couple onto that the fact that you're going to lock all these female drivers. I mean, I'm telling you, even though it's free to enter, they're going to lock these girls into a big time contract, some sort of a contract where they get a huge sum of what they earn. Again, nobody drives for free. This is the same thing that happened with the Red Bull thing. This is an investment to try to spring a star out of this, and I think they're going about it completely the wrong way. I think they're going to really hurt a lot of the female drivers who are coming up through the ranks, who are buying into this, and in a lot of ways, I don't blame them, because this is a potentially huge opportunity, because if they are that talented and they get exposure through this series, it will help them, no doubt about it. But if things don't go the perfect way for this series, it ain't going to work. So in closing on this topic, there's not really much else for me to say on it. I'm skeptical that this will even happen, looking at the amount of money and the amount of details that are still forthcoming. It does smell a bit like vaporware in a lot of ways. But I would be very much interested, if you are a female who watches my videos, if you're a female driver who watches my videos, or just happen to come across this because you saw the topic and you got this far, thank you. But I'd really like to see your thoughts in the comments. I'll try to heart them and move them to the top if you do happen to comment with your thoughts, your perspectives, because I think that really, again, is the important perspective here. I can only look at it from the business perspective. I can't look at it from the perspective of a woman. I can't look at it from the perspective of a female. So yeah, I would like to hear that side of it. So if you do have that side, if you feel passionate about it, let me know down in the comments, and let the world know down in the comments. And finally, a real quick story here was that Jimmie Johnson, who has been sponsorless since about May, when Lowe's determined that they were no longer going to be sponsoring Jimmie, has apparently got a sponsor that will be coming within the next 30 days, at least according to his team owner, Rick Hendrick. Now, interestingly enough, the rumor mill seems to be pointing towards Gatorade as the sponsor for this effort, which is interesting, but not completely outside of the realm of possibilities. If you don't know already, PepsiCo, which already is a major sponsor of Hendrick Motorsports and has been for years, they sponsor several of the cars on the team, and actually are so closely intertwined with the team that none of their merchandise has any Monster Energy logos all over it, because Pepsi doesn't want a Coke product, which Monster is, all over their stuff. So Gatorade is under the PepsiCo banner, as well as, of course, Pepsi and Mountain Dew, 2 sponsors that you see an awful lot on Hendrick cars. So this could be something where Hendrick Motorsports expands their partnership a little bit with PepsiCo maybe gets a sweetheart deal for being such a longtime supporter, and that's how they get this done. Don't expect, if it does happen, too much promotion for Jimmie himself. I think PepsiCo is more interested in promoting Chase Elliott and the Dewey Rider crap, that brand, if they're willing to do it. Because again, if Gatorade was really interested in NASCAR, they'd probably already be there. This would be something where I think PepsiCo would extend a helping hand to Hendrick. They'd keep Jimmie Johnson in the seat at least until 2021, I think it is, when Chad Knaus and his contract expires, and then probably, presumably, Johnson will be out. So, yeah, that's where I see that going, at least from the rumors we have so far, but then again, it could all be wrong. So that's a very long episode of This Week in Racing. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you didn't get too upset. I hope this discussion is civil, though I suspect it won't be. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Can't wait for Petit Le Mans. Check it out, by the way. If you were just going to watch Talladega this weekend, or maybe don't have any racing plans, watch Petit Le Mans. I think you'll be a little bit impressed. So we'll see you in the next video. Be sure to subscribe for more motorsport content. And yeah, until next week.